Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, where we break down chess games with a fun and instructive twist. Today, we're diving into an exciting battle between opponent playing white and OngoleBull as black. The game kicks off with a classic setup, and we'll explore the opening phase move by move to uncover key ideas and critical moments. So, let's get right into it. E4 is the first move, and this is textbook stuff. White immediately stakes a claim in the center, opening lines for the queen and bishop. Controlling the center is a fundamental principle in the opening, so this is a solid start. E5 from black mirrors white's control of the center, setting up a symmetrical pawn structure. This move keeps things balanced and prepares for natural piece development. Knight f3 attacks the e5 pawn and develops a piece toward the center. This is a standard developing move that also puts pressure on black's position. Knight c6 defends the e5 pawn and develops black's knight to a natural square, supporting central control and preparing for kingside development. Knight c3 is an interesting choice here. Instead of the more common bishop b5 or d4, white develops the knight to c3, reinforcing the center and preparing for flexible central play. This move supports e4 and can lead to a variety of setups, including the Vienna game. Knight f6 from black develops the knight actively, attacking the e4 pawn and preparing for kingside castling. This is a natural, principled move that challenges white's center. Bishop c4 develops the bishop to a strong diagonal, targeting the vulnerable f7 square. This is a classic Italian game idea, aiming for quick development and pressure on black's kingside. Bishop c5 mirrors white's bishop placement, also eyeing the f2 pawn and supporting central control. Both sides are racing to develop pieces actively, which is typical in open games like this. d3 is a cautious but solid move from white, reinforcing the e4 pawn and opening lines for the dark-squared bishop. This move signals a more positional approach rather than an immediate central strike with d4. h6 from black is a bit of a waiting move, preventing white's bishop or knight from landing on g5. It's a prophylactic idea, but it slightly slows down black's development since it doesn't contribute to piece activity or central control. Bishop e3 from white develops the bishop to e3, challenging black's bishop on c5 and aiming to exchange off a key defender. This move is logical and keeps the position balanced, but it also slightly blocks white's queen's natural development square on d2. Bishop b6 retreats the bishop to a safe square, maintaining pressure along the a7-g1 diagonal. Black wisely avoids the exchange, preserving the bishop pair and keeping tension in the position. Queen d2 from white connects the rooks and prepares for castling queenside or supporting the center. This is a flexible move that also eyes the bishop on e3 for a potential exchange. d6 from black shores up the center, supporting the e5 pawn and opening lines for the dark-squared bishop. This move is a key strategic idea to solidify black's pawn structure and prepare for further development. h3 from white is a prophylactic move, preventing black's pieces from pinning the knight on f3 or jumping into g4. It's a useful little move that keeps white's kingside safe. Bishop e6 develops black's bishop to a strong central square, challenging white's bishop on e3 and aiming to exchange off a key defender. This move also supports the d5 push later on. Knight a4 is where things start to get interesting. White aims to challenge black's bishop on b6, but this move actually turns out to be a mistake. The engine shows a significant drop in evaluation here, about 2.5 pawns in black's favor. Why? Because knight a4 sidelines the knight on the edge of the board, reducing its influence in the center and kingside. A better plan would have been to castle here, prioritizing king safety and completing development. Bishop takes e3 from black captures white's bishop, gaining the bishop pair advantage and simplifying the position. This is a strong, concrete move that capitalizes on white's misplaced knight. However, the engine suggests that knight takes e4 would have been even stronger, grabbing a central pawn and increasing black's activity. F takes e3 recaptures the bishop, but this opens white's king a bit and weakens the pawn structure around it. The engine indicates that queen takes e3 would have been a better choice, keeping the pawn structure intact and maintaining more control over the center. a6 from black is a waiting move, preventing any knight or bishop jumps to b5. However, the engine suggests bishop takes c4 would have been more active, exchanging off white's dangerous bishop and increasing black's control over the center. Bishop b3 retreats the bishop to a safe square, maintaining pressure along the diagonal and keeping options open. This is a natural developing move. d5 from black strikes in the center, challenging white's pawn structure and opening lines for black's pieces. This is a key strategic break that aims to activate black's bishops and rooks. E takes d5 captures the pawn, opening the e-file and creating some tension in the center. White gains a pawn temporarily, but the position remains complex. Bishop takes d5 recaptures the pawn, centralizing black's bishop and maintaining strong control over the center. Black's pieces are now more active and better coordinated. e4. White pushes the pawn to e4, aiming to challenge black's strong bishop on d5 and gain more central space. This is a natural and thematic break in the middle game, trying to pry open lines and activate pieces. Bishop takes b3, black captures on b3, grabbing white's bishop. This is a critical moment because black is converting the bishop pair advantage into concrete material gain. By taking the bishop, black simplifies the position and increases material lead. A takes b3, white recaptures, but now the pawn structure on the queenside is slightly compromised. The a-file is semi-open, which could become a target for black's rooks later. This structural weakness is something white will need to watch out for. Short castling, black castles kingside, a standard and important step to secure the king and connect the rooks. This also signals black's readiness to bring the heavy pieces into the game. Short castling, white follows suit, castling kingside to ensure king safety. Both sides have completed development, and now the middle game battle truly begins. Rook e8. Black places the rook on the open e-file, eyeing the center and preparing for potential central or kingside activity. This is a strong strategic move, increasing pressure on e4 and supporting future pawn breaks. Rook f2. White moves the rook to f2, a somewhat passive move. The rook is defending the second rank but doesn't contribute aggressively to the center or queenside. A more active plan might have been to challenge black's control of the e-file or prepare counterplay on the queenside. Knight h5. Black repositions the knight to h5, aiming to jump into f4. This is a classic outpost for knights in these structures, putting pressure on white's kingside and potentially threatening tactics involving g3 or f3 squares. Rook af1. White doubles rooks on the f-file, trying to reinforce control and possibly prepare for f4 or f5 pushes. This is a logical plan to contest black's knight and increase activity. Knight f4. Black's knight lands on a powerful central square, attacking white's bishop and exerting pressure on key squares like d3 and g2. This move also threatens to undermine white's pawn structure and king safety. Knight c3. White develops the knight back to c3, reinforcing the center and eyeing important squares like d5 and b5. This move also supports the e4 pawn and prepares for potential central breaks. f6. Black solidifies the e5 pawn and prevents white's knight or bishop from jumping to g5. This move also prepares for potential pawn breaks like g5 or e5-e4 later, increasing black's kingside space and control. Knight h4. White moves the knight to h4, challenging black's knight on f4 and trying to reduce black's kingside pressure. This is a good defensive resource, but it also sidelines the knight somewhat. King h7. Black tucks the king away to h7, a prophylactic move to avoid any checks or pins along the g-file and prepare for potential pawn pushes on the kingside. This is a subtle but important safety measure. Rook takes f4. White captures black's knight on f4 with the rook. This move looks natural but turns out to be a missed opportunity. The engine suggests that king h2 would have been a better defensive move, keeping the rook on f2 and maintaining pressure. By capturing, white opens the e-file and weakens control over key squares. Why is this a mistake? Because after e takes f4, black recaptures with a pawn that opens lines for the queen and rook, increasing black's activity and central control. White loses the initiative here. E takes f4, black recaptures with the pawn, opening the e-file and gaining a strong foothold in the center. This move activates black's queen and rook, increasing pressure on white's position. Black's material advantage and piece activity start to tell here. Queen takes f4. White captures the pawn on f4 with the queen, trying to regain material and keep the position balanced. However, this move places the queen in a somewhat vulnerable spot and doesn't solve White's underlying problems of piece coordination and king safety. Queen d4 check. Black checks with the queen, forcing White's king to move and gaining a tempo. This is a strong tactical resource, exploiting White's slightly exposed king and lack of coordination. King h1. White sidesteps the check, moving the king to a safer square. This is forced, but it also limits White's options and keeps the king somewhat exposed to future attacks along the dark squares. Queen e5. Black centralizes the queen, maintaining pressure and eyeing multiple targets including the kingside and center. This move also prepares to double rooks or bring other pieces into the attack. Queen g4. White tries to exchange queens or at least reduce Black's attacking potential by offering a queen trade. This is a reasonable defensive idea, aiming to relieve pressure. Queen g5. Black declines the queen trade and keeps the queens on the board, maintaining attacking chances. This is a strong practical decision because Black's active pieces and better coordination favor keeping the tension. Queen f3. White moves the queen to f3, trying to defend key squares and keep the position together. However, this is a missed opportunity. The engine suggests that queen f5 check would have been a much stronger move, delivering a check that forces Black's king into a passive position and gains initiative. Why is queen f3 suboptimal? Because it allows Black to capture the knight on h4 next, gaining material and increasing the advantage. Queen takes h4. Black captures the knight on h4, winning material decisively. This move seals Black's winning advantage, as White's king safety is compromised and Black's material lead is overwhelming. Knight d5. White tries to activate the knight with a centralizing move, aiming to create threats and possibly fork Black's pieces. However, at this stage, White is already significantly behind in material and positional factors, so this move is more of a last-ditch attempt to stir complications rather than a game-changer. Rook ac8. Black calmly places the rook on the open c-file, increasing pressure on White's knight and controlling a critical open line. This is a textbook example of using open files to maximize rook activity, a key strategic theme in the middle game. c3. White shores up the d4 square and tries to limit Black's knight mobility. However, this move slightly weakens the b3 pawn and doesn't address the bigger problem: Black's overwhelming material and piece activity. A better alternative would have been to look for active counterplay, perhaps by challenging Black's knight directly or seeking checks. Knight e5. Black's knight jumps to a dominant central square, threatening multiple targets and increasing control over key squares like d3 and f3. This move also eyes White's queen and pawns, tightening the noose. The key idea here is to use the knight's outpost to restrict White's options and prepare tactical strikes. Queen f5 check. White attempts to check Black's king, hoping to gain some breathing room or provoke weaknesses. While checks are generally good, here it's more of a delaying tactic because Black's position is solid and the king can easily evade. King h8. Black sidesteps the check safely, maintaining the strong knight and rook coordination. This move keeps the king out of harm's way and prepares to consolidate the advantage. Knight e7. White's knight moves aggressively, trying to create threats or forks, but this is a bit desperate. The knight is heading into Black's territory but is vulnerable to capture. The key strategic theme here is that piece activity alone isn't enough when you're down material and facing coordinated threats. Rook takes e7. Black captures the knight decisively, increasing the material lead. This is a critical moment where Black converts the positional advantage into concrete material gain. The rook capture also removes White's last active piece in the center, further sealing Black's dominance. Queen takes c8 check. White grabs Black's rook, delivering a check. This is a natural attempt to regain material and create counterplay. However, it doesn't change the evaluation significantly because Black's knight and remaining pieces are still dominating. King h7. Black calmly moves the king back, escaping the check and maintaining control. This move also keeps the king safe behind the pawn shield, a key defensive principle in the endgame and late middle game. Queen f5 check. White checks again, trying to harass black's king and find weaknesses. This repetitive checking pattern shows white limited options and the difficulty of breaking through black's fortress. King g8, black sidesteps the check, keeping the king active but safe. This move also prepares to bring the king closer to the center if needed, a common endgame principle. Queen c8 check. White continues with checks, but these are becoming less effective as black's position is solid and the material advantage is decisive. King f7. Here black chooses to move the king forward, but the engine suggests that king h7 would have been better to keep the king safer behind the pawn shield. This subtle difference shows how king safety remains crucial even in winning positions. Moving forward with the king can sometimes expose it to checks or tactics, so always consider the safest square first. d4. White pushes the pawn, trying to open lines and create counterplay. This is a thematic attempt to activate pieces and challenge black's control of the center. However, given the material deficit, it's unlikely to turn the tide. Knight d3. Black's knight jumps to d3, attacking white's queen and controlling key squares. This move also cuts off white's queen from defending critical pawns and squares, tightening black's grip on the position. Queen takes b7. White captures a pawn, trying to gain material and create threats. However, this move is a missed opportunity. The engine suggests that playing e5 would have been stronger, aiming to challenge black's knight and open lines for white's pieces. This teaches us the importance of prioritizing active play and piece coordination over grabbing pawns in lost positions. Knight f2 check. Black delivers a check with the knight, forcing white's king to move and gaining a tempo. This is a powerful tactical motif, using checks to improve piece activity and restrict the opponent's king. King g1. White's king moves to safety, but this is forced and limits white's options. The king is now more vulnerable to black's coordinated attack. Knight takes e4. Black captures a central pawn, increasing material advantage and opening lines. However, this is another missed opportunity. The engine suggests that queen takes e4 would have been even stronger, keeping pressure on white's position and maintaining threats. This shows how even winning players can improve by choosing the most forcing moves. Queen d5 check. White checks again, trying to create complications. This is a natural defensive resource but not enough to change the evaluation. King f8. Black's king steps back, avoiding checks and maintaining a solid position. This move is about patience and consolidating the winning advantage. Queen d8 check. White continues with checks, but these are becoming increasingly desperate. The key idea is that checks alone don't win games if you're down material and your pieces are poorly coordinated. King f7. Black calmly returns the king to f7, maintaining the stronghold and preparing to finish the game. This shows excellent technique in converting a winning position by avoiding unnecessary risks and keeping the king safe. Queen d5 check. White starts with a check, trying to harass black's king and create some breathing room. But here, the key idea is that white's queen is active but lacks sufficient support. Black's king can safely move, and white's threats are more annoying than dangerous. This move keeps the game going but doesn't change the evaluation much. King f8. Black calmly sidesteps the check, stepping back to a safe square. This move is about king safety and maintaining coordination with the rook and knight. Notice how black avoids unnecessary exchanges or risky moves, a classic endgame principle. Keep your king safe and active. Queen f5. Now white shifts the queen to f5, aiming to keep pressure on black's position. However, this is a critical mistake that costs white about half a pawn in evaluation. The better move here was queen d8 check, which would have checked the king and forced black into a less comfortable position, possibly gaining some tempo or forcing concessions. Instead, queen f5 allows black to improve their position without trouble. The key takeaway: when you have checks available, especially in a worse position, look for forcing moves first. Knight g3. Black's knight jumps to g3, a powerful tactical strike. This move threatens white's rook and also eyes key squares around white's king. The knight here is a dominant piece, and black's coordination is tightening. This move increases black's advantage, showing the importance of piece activity and tactical awareness in the endgame. Queen c8 check. White tries to check again, but this move actually worsens white's position significantly, increasing black's advantage by more than 2 pawns. The engine suggests that queen f2 would have been a better defensive resource, aiming to protect critical squares and keep the queen more centralized. Instead, queen c8 check allows black to respond with a strong, consolidating move, and white's queen is somewhat misplaced. This teaches us that not all checks are good checks. Sometimes they help your opponent improve their position. Rook e8. Black places the rook on e8, defending and preparing to invade. This is a textbook example of using your heavy pieces to dominate open files and restrict the opponent's king and queen. Black's pieces are perfectly coordinated now, and white's queen is struggling to find safe squares. Queen takes a6, white grabs a pawn, trying to gain material. But this move is a big mistake, dropping the evaluation by over 2 points. The better alternative was queen g4, which would have kept pressure on black's king and maintained some defensive chances. Instead, queen takes a6 is a greedy capture that allows black to execute a winning tactic. This is a classic example of how grabbing pawns in a losing position can backfire badly. Always ask yourself, is this capture safe, or does it open me up to a decisive counterattack? Knight takes f1. Black's knight captures the rook on f1, a devastating blow. This move wins material outright and practically seals the game. The knight's capture removes white's last major defender and increases black's material advantage to nearly a full rook. This is a great demonstration of tactical awareness. Black spotted the undefended rook and capitalized immediately. Queen takes f1. White recaptures the knight, but now black's material advantage is overwhelming. White is down a rook and struggling to find counterplay. This move is forced, but it highlights the importance of piece safety. Losing the rook here was the turning point. Rook e1. Black invades with the rook, attacking white's queen and threatening further material gain. This move is about active piece play and cutting off white's queen from defending critical squares. The key idea here is to use your material advantage to restrict your opponent's pieces and prepare for the final blow. Queen takes e1. White captures the rook, but this exchange only accelerates the loss. White's queen is now alone against black's queen and rook, and the material deficit is too big to overcome. Queen takes e1 check. Black captures the queen with check, a decisive move that wins the queen outright and leaves white helpless. This is the final nail in the coffin. Black's queen now dominates the board, and white's position is hopeless. King h2. White moves the king to h2, the only legal move, but it's too little too late. Black's material and positional advantage is overwhelming. Queen d2. Black calmly places the queen on d2, controlling key squares and preparing to mop up the remaining pawns. This move shows excellent technique, no rush, just methodical finishing. Black's coordination and material superiority make this position a textbook winning endgame. Alright, let's wrap this up with some key takeaways from this endgame phase. First, always prioritize forcing moves like checks and captures when you're behind. They can create chances or at least complicate the position. White missed some critical checks that could have slowed black's progress. Second, piece activity and coordination trump material sometimes, but once black's pieces got active and coordinated, white's position collapsed quickly. The knight's jump to g3 and the rook's invasion on e1 were perfect examples of this. Third, avoid greedy pawn grabs in losing positions. Queen takes a6 was a costly mistake that allowed black to finish decisively. Finally, king safety remains crucial even in the endgame. Black's careful king moves kept the king safe and ready to support the winning plan. Thanks for sticking with me through this exciting endgame analysis. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like and subscribe for more fun and instructive chess content. Also, be sure to subscribe to OngoleBull's Chess Journey YouTube channel to follow more great games and insights. Keep practicing those tactical motifs and endgame principles, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy chessing!